All right, welcome to Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David WILCOCK. I'm here with Corey Goode, the Insider's Insider. And in today's episode, we're going to cover a broad topic. We've only really been talking about extraterrestrials up until now that have biological forms that would appear to have a hominid appearance. They might not be human, but they're human-like. In this episode, we're going to talk about etheric beings and get into all the different avenues and roads that leads us down. So, Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I guess the first thing that we could start with, keeping it simple, is just a brief recap about, in Solar Warden, you studied some beings that were apparently just plasma?
Yes, beings that lived off the electric field of Jupiter that were plasma-based, that mainstream science would not even consider life.
The conventional biological view of life is that it has to eat, it has to excrete, it has to have locomotion, it has to have respiration,
right,
and it has to have sentience. So how do you get eating, excreting, locomotion, and sentience in these plasma beings exactly? How do they demonstrate signs of life?
They were definitely sentient. They showed signs of preservation of life. They did not like or appreciate being experimented on or having pieces of their bodies harvested for experiments. They would avoid craft coming towards them. So that showed a sign of intelligence. They reproduced sort of like mitosis. And they used, I don't exactly know how the form of locomotion they used, but they would travel through the electromagnetic field of the planet.
Was there anything visible about them at all, or are they almost completely invisible to the naked eye?
Almost completely invisible to the naked eye.
Did they have an infrared heat signature or something like that? How did you know where they were?
I don't believe it was infrared, but there was a type of imaging that they used that allowed them to, the scientists, to observe them.
Okay, I guess that's important because I had kind of seen them as maybe being like a glowing plasma.
It's not a giant plasma thing you can see with your physical eyes.
Why do you think it was considered so important that you guys spent so much time going out and looking for these things?
It was new, it was science, and it was a science vessel.
Okay. Now, there's a whole science in the esoteric community. Jose Escamilla talks about the rods.
Oh, yeah.
These things
Skyfish,
right. These things that sometimes seem to show up on cameras. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes I've wondered, is that insects that are flying by, but they're kind of smearing out on the camera? So since we're talking about etheric beings, and that's a big topic in the alternative media, do you have any information about that one way or the other?
Not that one in particular, but they're similar type of plasma-type beings out in space. So I can't say that those aren't real.
Okay, there's a very important footage that I want everybody to see now, and we can roll it as I'm talking. This is footage from the space shuttle where there was a tether experiment to a tethered satellite. And they have this long electroconductive wire out in space conducting energy, electrical energy, to the satellite. And as they did this, all of these spherical glowing orb forms with kind of like a hole in the middle cluster around the tether. Now, a lot of people have called that a UFO sighting, but it looks like these are some form of etheric beings. What do you think we're looking at here?
That's most likely one of these life forms that live in the Earth's electromagnetic field. Every planetoid that has an electromagnetic field is going to be a part of their feeding ground as they travel around. And some of them spend their entire life cycle in one sphere.
Why do you think they would be attracted to a wire that has an extremely high amount of electrical energy running through it?
Their food source is the electromagnetic energy, and if it's causing some sort of pulse or is interrupting or pulling from that source, it's going to get their attention.
So they're feeding?
Yes.
Interesting. Do they go after satellites, like the geostationary satellites that we use for cell phones?
I've not heard of that, no.
What about craft, like the space shuttle or X-37B or space program?
I have not heard of encounters of them going after spacecraft or collisions or any issues like that.
Okay. So far, what you're talking about to me sort of sounds like an amoeba or a bacteria, a very primitive, very low-level life form of some kind. Are there any signs of advanced intelligence in these things? Do they do anything that suggests that they might be smart?
There was a lot of speculation on that. If they are highly intelligent, then they are not paying any attention to us or wanting to communicate with us. So, but it really seems like they are focused on just living out their life cycle, reproducing, just, you know, having their life cycle.
So it's almost more like a bacterial life.
Right.
Okay. So this topic of etheric beings goes into a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. We've also, to go to the far opposite end of the spectrum, you said that the blue spheres themselves were explained to you as some type of etheric being.
Yes.
Not a technology.
Right. It's not a technology. It was explained that they are the highest density of the sphere being alliance. They're said to be ninth density beings that appear as orbs or spheres. And the size does not matter. I mean, it can be, you know, the size of a ping pong ball, or it can be so large that it can contain an entire solar system.
Right. That level is going to be difficult for some people because we tend to think of intelligent life as having a body. Where is the dividing line between biological life and etheric life?
If it's sentient but doesn't have a corporeal body, then it's going to be etheric life.
Okay. But specifically, do these etheric beings start out as biological and they graduate into energetic, or are there beings that have an entire life cycle that remains energetic the entire time?
And the answer is both. Some of them have had a physical body. Some of them are said to be from somewhere called the outer realm or another reality or something. So it's a combination. There are a lot of different types of non-corporeal beings.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the negative ones, because that's obviously something we wanted to get into. One of the topics that we had in our list for this episode was shadow beings. So what are shadow beings?
Well, shadow beings can be several different things. A lot of times when people see shadow beings, they are beings that are coming in to observe them, or they can be beings that come in that are trying to cause fear so they can feed off of the loosh or the energy from the fear. And some of them are entities having out-of-body experiences to do the same thing, such as reptilians having out-of-body experiences, visiting people, and you know, scaring the bejesus out of them so they could, you know, feed off of the energy they release.
So there's a shadow that people see. Just walk us through what someone would experience if this happened to them.
Okay. Well, this is definitely first-hand knowledge. A lot of times, out of the corner of their eye, they will see the shape of a human walk by, or duck into the next room real quick, and you know, you'll jerk around and look and just miss it. And it's happened with my children. They've seen them to where, you know, my daughters looked up and they just stay there and let her observe them.
Like a silhouette?
A silhouette of a human.
What does it look like? Do you see a face? Do you see skin?
It looks like a three-dimensional shadow.
Just a shadow. Okay.
Right.
I spoke to a lot of people who took LSD, and other people who I spoke to told me that they would see these things quite often. So do you think that when people take these mind-expanding psychedelic drugs,
yeah, it drops the veil,
that it makes these things more visible?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that was one of the things that they experimented with, giving people psychotropic drugs, trying to see, find out what they will experience, what type of etheric beings they may encounter, and depending on the person, what's going on in their life, whether they're positive or negative oriented, they may experience negative or positive etheric beings.
What would someone actually go through if they had a positive etheric being experience?
A lot of times they'll be given spiritual knowledge or teachings or just real blissful emotional feelings.
Okay. So what is the agenda of these negative beings when they're appearing in front of people? What's their end game? What's their goal?
Some of them are there just to feed off of your energy. Some of them are just there to observe. And some of them have been put there as entity attachments by people using like dark magic, like people in the cabal. If they can't control somebody by using mind control or using other methods, they will use entity attachments and use those to cause people to go into reactionary states of mind.
Okay, so this is actually a really, really big topic.
And they also use these entity attachments as gatekeepers. When a person starts to, if they can't keep a person from accessing memories, they will use them as gatekeepers to where if they try to talk about the memories, the entity will cause them to go into all kinds of anxiety attacks or any number of things.
What is the relationship between trauma-based mind control, psychotropic drugs, and the use of these entities? How does that actually work in this MK Ultra technology? Well,
they use a combination. They're going to use all of the above on people, but different people are resistant to these the three things that you mentioned. They usually use them all together to get the desired effect, because using just one is not going to do the trick.
Okay.
Using trauma is also one of the ways that they implant these entity attachments. Physical, sexual trauma is one of the ways that they use to implant these.
Does the trauma make someone more receptive to an entity attachment somehow?
Well, the trauma itself is the glue that binds.
Okay. What is the type of being that is going to do this? Are you saying that these beings that are attached to people, that they just live inside that person? That's their whole life, is like a parasite in a host?
Right. Yes.
Do these beings have multiple people they live in at the same time, or do they focus on one?
I don't know, the limitations that these etheric beings are under.
Okay.
But yes, they're definitely assigned to people and will be dedicated to whatever they are assigned to do. So if they're assigned to a person to keep them from talking about certain topics, they will be very dedicated to that. And anytime the person even tries to broach the topic, they will be thrown into whatever this entity uses as a tool, a panic attack, or go into confusion or fall asleep.
We hear multiple stories of shamanic practices saying that these entities anchor to certain parts of the body that might have pain or might have disease conditions or kind of like a rottenness inside the tissue, some kind of putrescence. Could you talk about that a little bit?
The information that I saw is that some of these entities can also cause people to have, over time, cause them to have tumors and weird things that show up in their body where the attachment is. That's definitely in line with what I heard.
So we have different words for these kind of things. I've heard them called engrammic memories. I've heard them called somatic memories. Massage therapy gets into this, acupuncture gets into this. Can you just personally confirm that these entities do anchor to certain parts of the body and that there would be usually pain or disease conditions in that particular area?
Yes, they're going to be anchored to different parts of your energy field, and when they do, they're sucking energy from your body, and that is making you ill. And in that area, you will have a physical manifestation, and it can be pain, it can be lesions, it can be any number of things.
But what did you hear about how to actually solve this? This is going to freak people out.
Right,
I'm trying to give them some hope here.
Well, I do know that shamans have figured out a way of getting rid of them. And it's something that, Western medicine doesn't even consider in any equation if a person's ill or, having psychological issues or any, or anything. They're not going to consider that at all. But in, shamans, that's going to be one of the first things they're looking for. They're looking for, there's something spiritually that's manifesting itself physically.
What do you think about the Native American strategies of burning either sweetgrass or Palo Santo wood or sage to create some kind of smoke that makes it less friendly to these entities?
I think that it probably, something's happening to change the vibration, to make the vibration sort of putrid for these entities to where, they can't coexist with it. I don't think it's the actual smoke that's, making things uncomfortable for them. It's more of a change in vibration and energy related to the burning or the use of these items.
Well, that mirrors what's actually said in the Law of One. They mentioned two strategies. One would be hanging up garlic. If you think that there's entities in a room or you're moving into a new space and you're worried about entities being in there, crushing garlic, and really the intent being that you set your intent that that's driving them away. And then the garlic becomes a focal point for your intent.
We don't understand the power of our co-creative consciousness. You can will them away. But if you're told you can't and you're convinced you can't, then you won't be able to.
And another thing that the Law of One said is to pour salt along the doorways and the windows and then charge that salt with the intent of the purest love vibration, and that will block entities from being able to get back in once you drive them out. Do you think that the salt crystal, as it's explained in the Law of One, could have some sort of storage capacity, some sort of vibrational ability to hold the intent?
That's absolutely possible because crystals are used to store all sorts of information. Information as in data and information as in actual, beings can be stored in crystals.
Now let's talk about the pyramid for a little bit. You saw some of my episodes in Wisdom Teachings about pyramid technology.
Right.
When people go into the Great Pyramid, this technology apparently was made by an earlier incarnation of the sphere beings. If you believe the sphere beings are the Ra of the Law of One, they built the pyramid. So you have this sarcophagus, and the idea is that you go through a purification ritual, someone's holding a crystal, all of these negative karmic attachments that you have, actual entity attachments, are purged in the pyramid as a result of going through some sort of psychodrama where you have to forgive the negative things that happened and forgive yourself and forgive the people that hurt you. So if that's such a big part of the technology, is there a psycho-emotional component to these entities? Are they attached to us because of our unwillingness or inability to forgive?
Yes. Emotions have energy, and that energy will have, I guess, sort of like mass. And that is something that these entities can hold on to. And
like
use as an anchor.
Almost.
Use like an anchor as well.
Right.
And when you let go of that emotion and energy, they don't have that anchor any longer.
The main place in the Law of One that these entities get attached to us is in our digestive system. Because with all the bends in our intestine, you have this impacted material that's waste products that could be in your colon for 20 years. and those entities can live in there. Now, you've been going through a really phenomenal transformation yourself. You've been losing a tremendous amount of weight, and it all happened after you touched hands with Kari, is kind of how I'm seeing it. Something has been changing in you. So do you think that your own weight loss, do you feel as if you've had a deliverance from these entities to some degree, that you've shed them?
Well, I definitely went through a period when I first was starting to discuss everything that we've discussed in this show.
Before we did the show?
Before we did the show, before I even really began to tell you all the deep details of all of this. I had the memories. I could revisit the memories anytime I wanted, but if I ever tried to verbalize them, I would start stammering. I would get very anxious or very tired and forget I was even going to talk about it. And wow. I ended up doing a remote viewing of my light body, and I visited this orb that was in my light body, and with my mind, I wanted to see inside of it, and about a quarter of it went clear. And I saw this, what looked like almost like a frog, sitting all curled up inside this little sphere inside my light body, but its head was squished like, it was like a frog with its head kind of long ways like this. And the first time I saw it, it freaked out and it said, "You will forget me." And I forgot it.
Wow.
And so, you know, I was unable to talk about this stuff until I was able to go through the process of going through a deliverance of getting rid of the entities. And I did it using my background and the knowledge I knew by calling on the name of Jesus. And that's all I knew. And when I did, I actually, with my physical eyes, saw things just leaving me.
Wow, that's crazy.
Like, I actually saw shadows leaving me. And afterwards, I could talk about it. Overnight, I could talk about it.
This is interesting because multiple insiders I've talked to...
just talking about it now just really gives me the shivers.
Multiple insiders I've talked to, you try to get them talking about certain subjects and they immediately start falling asleep, they get distracted, they go on tangents that have nothing to do with the question. You wait 20 minutes before they let you in, and then you try again, and then they go off and do it again. And
it's one of the things in the secret space program even. These dark practitioners will attach entities to people to keep them from talking about what they're not supposed to talk about, or looking into things that they're not supposed to be looking into, to keep them in line, to control them. So these dark cabal type people, they use these entities as tools.
Would you agree that doing things like exercise and healthy diet can help to cleanse this stuff? Is that part of what these sphere beings have told you to do?
Yes. When you are eating higher density foods and you're keeping your body, I guess, in shape and cleansed, all the toxins out, there aren't these lower density particles or areas for them to hold on to and use as an anchor. And you are also, they are not compatible with your energy anymore. So, you know, having a high vibratory diet and making sure that you're trying to put yourself in a positive environment as much as possible will limit their ability to hang on.
Some people watching this show, well, I don't have any entities, I'm clean. Is that a natural thing that the ego is going to want to say, that you're totally free of these entities? How widespread is this? Does everybody have some attachment at all times?
Most people have some sort of either attachment or some sort of connection going on. If you have any trauma, physical or mental trauma, that affects your daily life, then there's a very good chance there's also an entity involved. Not always, and this is not something that people need to completely dwell on either. If we begin to change our diet, you know, do the things to make the changes in ourselves, you know, forgiving others, forgiving ourselves, that releases the energy that these emotions have created, and these beings will not have the ability to hang on to you. And the blue avians have made it clear that here in the future, with the solar events that are happening and the energetic changes, these etheric beings are not going to be able to stay in our reality. They're going to be pushed back out to the outer realms, is what they said. They just will not be able to coexist with us any longer.
What will happen to the people who are the hosts for those beings?
Good question. Everyone has someone in their life that, I guess, sort of will treat them badly and sort of get off of, I guess, sort of like a vampire. They'll vampire off of you.
Sociopaths,
that kind of thing. A lot of those people have entity attachments, and these entities are in a symbiotic relationship. These people are being sociopaths, mistreating people, drawing their energy. This energy is going up to the entity, and the entity is sharing it with the person that is hosting the entity. If the entity is removed, the person goes through withdrawals, just like a heroin addict would if they went cold turkey, stopping the drug.
So is there any last thing you'd like to leave people with as far as, first of all, let's not demonize this, right? This is something that happens almost to everybody.
Right.
So it's not like we want to start turning against people.
Yeah, you can't start pointing fingers and saying, you have entity attachments, you have entity attachments. You know, that's, everyone's going to be affected on some level by this.
But it is possible to use these spiritual teachings to purify yourself with diet, consciousness, and become far less affected by this. Than,
right, and it's a daily struggle, because you're going to run into people on a daily basis that are infested, and you're going to have to, fend them off on a daily basis.
Did these sphere beings say that eventually all these entities will be gone as we go through this ascension process?
That's what they said. They said that the energy changes that are occurring were going to be incompatible with these entities, and they were going to be driven back to the outer realms where they came from.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for in this episode. Very interesting stuff. The power is in your hands. And I'm David WILCOCK. This is Cosmic Disclosure. I thank you for watching. Beings, and get into all the different avenues and roads that leads us down. So, Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I guess the first thing that we could start with, keeping it simple, is just a brief recap about, in Solar Warden, you studied some beings that were apparently just plasma?
Yes, beings that lived off the electric field of Jupiter that were plasma-based, that mainstream science would not even consider life.
The conventional biological view of life All right, welcome to Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David WILCOCK. I'm here with Corey Goode, the Insider's Insider. And in today's episode, we're going to cover a broad topic. We've only really been talking about extraterrestrials up until now that have biological forms that would appear to have a hominid appearance. They might not be human, but they're human-like. In this episode, we're going to talk about etheric life, is that it has to eat, it has to excrete, it has to have locomotion, it has to have respiration.
Right.
And it has to have sentience. So how do you get eating, excreting, locomotion, and sentience in these plasma beings exactly? How do they demonstrate signs of life?
They were definitely sentient. They showed signs of preservation of life. They did not like or appreciate being experimented on or having pieces of their bodies harvested for experiments. They would have allowed them to, the scientists, to observe them.
Okay, I guess that's important because I had kind of seen them as maybe being like a glowing plasma.
It's not a giant plasma thing you can see with your physical eyes.
Why do you think it was considered so important that you guys spent so much time going out and looking for these things?
It was new, it was science, and it was a science vessel.
Okay. Now, there's a whole
void craft coming towards them. So that showed a sign of intelligence. They reproduced sort of like mitosis. And they used, I don't exactly know how the form of locomotion they used, but they would travel through the electromagnetic field of the planet.
Was there anything visible about them at all, or are they almost completely invisible to the naked eye?
Almost completely invisible to the naked eye.
Did they have an infrared heat signature or something like that? How did you know where they were?
I don't believe it was infrared, but there was a type of imaging that they used that